Welcome to this edition of the YAHOWAH blog. We're continuing our preparation for our analysis of the Christian New Testament by revealing what Yahweh, through the prophet Yeshaya, known as Isaiah, conveyed in the 11th chapter of his book about the person who would be tasked with this responsibility. He is called the choder. A choder is a stem or a sucker, a stem off a main branch, or it can be a sucker off a fallen stump or rootstock. It is interesting in that this person is one of the more acclaimed individuals in God's story, that he is being equipped with the seven spirits of Yahweh. And yet this individual is often misconstrued by Christians as being their Jesus. And yet that's not even remotely possible, because this individual has the spirit of Yahweh, and you can't be a mythical creation that robs God's beloved son, Dode, of his titles, Messiah and Son of God, and be anyhow related to Yahweh. Moreover, the choder is a stick compared to a main branch. And therefore, if you were going to make this Jesus, then choder would be a really bad term, because rather than robbing Dode to create the myth of Jesus, it makes Jesus hugely subordinate to Dode. So it's brain dead to go that direction. We have a mother goddess cult that is reappearing now under the truth of Mother God on YouTube, with a series of songs so stupid I'm embarrassed that I ever knew them. But one of them is actually written to propose the absurd notion that Dode is this choder. But Dode, according to Yahweh, and he says it explicitly if they would ever read what I have written, that Dode is named Shemach. He is not just the branch, the main branch. He is actually named. He is known by. His reputation is. He is called. He is designated the branch. And as the branch, he is the branch of the tree of lives. He is the most important individual in God's story. The choder is a stem. They're not in the same league. It's like comparing the sun and the moon. Yes, the moon reflects the sun's light and illuminates our night, but it's 400 times smaller than the sun and doesn't actually produce its own light. So are they similar? No. And is a choder the same as a shemach? No, not even remotely. Well, I'm delighted to have the job and to be a choder to the shemach. The fact of the matter is, you can't degrade Dode to a choder. He is the shemach. And when Yahweh explained his relationship with Dode, he explained that he was going to give Dode, and did give Dode, his spirit. The Ruach came upon him and never left him. Ruach singular. Nope, there's no reference whatsoever to a seven spirits coming upon Dode. And then you got the little problem, just wee little problem. Who was the first person that introduced the choder?
You?
No. Dode wrote of the choder 300 years before Yeshaya picked up on the theme. And Dode had a lot to say about this individual, as well as this individual's wife and his whole approach. And Dode was not writing that in first person. He was speaking of him in third person, and therefore the choder cannot be Dode. But thanks for playing anyway. I appreciate you making a fool of yourself. If it would be a distraction, I guess, if you were smart. But fortunately, this mother goddess cult is not. We are continuing now with the Yeshayah being inspired by Yahweh to say, so it will come to pass in that day. So this is now speaking of a future time. It will come to pass in that day. Yeshayah is a prophet. He's speaking of something that is going to happen in the future, not something that happened 300 years ago. I know this time is this complex thing for a lot of people, but Dode had been, Dode would be, but when Dode returns, he's not returning with the seven spirits of Yahweh. He is returning to accomplish something important, to serve as the Passover lamb, by the way, while we're at it. Speaking of stupid. The Mother Goddess cult in their new songs says that it is incorrect to suggest that the Adamah Parah, whom Yeshayah, Isaiah, has already introduced in this presentation of the Towrah and associated them, called the Towrah of Parah, and that is also introduced in coordination with the Shabuah harvest and the Towrah harvest, and Yeshayah 17, calling him again the Parah and a Zeroah. That individual cannot be sacrificed in conjunction with the Adamah Parah of Numbers 19 to redeem the adulterous woman of Numbers 5, or to explain why it was Elijah that is coming back, Eliah, that is coming back to orchestrate the condemnation of Israel's religious and political establishment over the sacrifice of another bull. But their answer is no, none of that takes place. There is no purification. There is no means to solve the problem of the adulterous religious woman of Israel. It's you just come to Jerusalem and you don't have to worry about a thing. You all will be there when Dode returns and Yahweh returns. No cleansing necessary, because, well, there can be no human sacrifice. And the Adamah Parah is a person. In fact, Isaiah speaks of this individual as the man from Edom, who is dressed in bloody red, who saves many people as a result of this. But nope, can't happen because, well, you can't have human sacrifice. Well, okay, let's play with that. Then who was the Passover lamb? I thought the Passover lamb was Dode. Is Dode not a human? Huh. So you're denying that Dode served as the Passover lamb. Now, I would just to play along here. Do animals have bashar bodies?
Yes.
Yeah, they do, don't they? They do. Animals have bashar bodies, just like we humans have bashar bodies, right?
Yep.
Do animals have nefesh souls?
Absolutely.
Okay, we humans have nefesh souls too. 2 out of 2, right? So, is there a difference between a human man that is created in the image of God and an animal? Is there any distinction according to God?
Well, we have a Nesama.
A Nesama, that would be it.
Some people have a Nesama.
Yeah, a Nesama, which is a conscience. So the thing that makes us human is the conscience. Is there any suggestion in the sacrifice of the Passover lamb or the Towrah bull that their Nesama is being sacrificed?
No.
So their humanity is not being sacrificed.
No.
So there's not a problem there's no problem here with human sacrifice. It's just a body.
Plus, they volunteer.
Right, but it's just a body, right?
It's just a body.
Right.
Absolutely.
So if I want to give my body in accordance with the instructions of the Adamah Parah on Towrah to cleanse this remaining remnant of Yisrael so that they're prepared to celebrate Yahweh's return with Dode, that rather than being a violation of God's instructions is compatible with God's instructions, correct?
You are fulfilling.
I am fulfilling God's instructions. Okay, so they missed that one. But then the next one they had is that You can't ever be wrong and speak for God. You'd be a false prophet if you're ever wrong. So does Yahweh call Abraham a prophet?
Oh yeah.
He does, huh? Did Abraham ever get anything right?
No.
No. So Abraham was constantly wrong, sometimes really, really wrong. But Abraham's a prophet, right?
Yep.
Okay. So the test for a prophet can't be you get everything right.
Nobody can get everything right.
Oh, well, okay, let's not even go there yet. But Abraham, a prophet, and I'm not sure he got anything right. And yet, there you go. He is a prophet who didn't get anything right.
That's true.
But he's still a prophet.
Yep.
And you and I know why he is a prophet. He's a prophet because that narrative that he had with Yahweh explains how we go about becoming part of the covenant. It doesn't encourage us, doesn't enable us to be part of the covenant. That doesn't happen until Dowd fulfills it, which is why that whole experience on Mount Moriah, when Abraham and Yishak climb Mount Moriah as the dress rehearsal for Passover, and Yahweh says, no, you're not taking your son. I'm going to provide the lamb out of my son. And so that whole episode is to point us in the direction of how we become covenant, which is to capitalize on what Dowd did by not sacrificing his humanity, but simply shedding his Bashar body as the Passover lamb. His Nefesh soul went on to take our guilt into Sheol, and this Nefesh soul was protected by the Ruach of Yahweh and taken back to be with the Father on Bokurim. And all decided upon because, well, when it comes to Nesalmas, Dowd had the best one going.
Oh yeah.
He had the first, there would be the extra virgin of the Nesalmas. I mean, the first press, absolutely perfect. It doesn't get better than Dowd's Nesalma. Okay, but by the way, this whole idea of perfect, why we're at it, was Dowd perfect?
No.
Did he serve as the Passover lamb?
Absolutely.
Was Dowd a prophet?
Yes.
Did he make mistakes?
Oh, a whole bunch.
How about Moshe? Was he called the greatest of the prophets?
Absolutely. Yep.
Did he say some really dumb stuff?
Oh yeah.
So figure it out, folks. Now, let's just pretend for a moment that God had a different way of going about things, that God's new way of going about things is that you become perfect before you actually become covenant, because you really couldn't become part of the covenant unless you're perfect, right? So you have to become perfect before you're part of the covenant. How is that possible?
It's not.
Okay. And let's just say that we were perfect in the human definition of that word. What would distinguish us and what would make us interesting to God? The answer is nothing. Nothing. We'd cease to be interesting. Is there a lamb that has ever been perfect?
No.
No, there isn't, is there? So we obviously have a really crappy definition of what that means. And I have explained what God is doing to perfect us, which is he's Dowd carried away our guilt and deposited in Sheol. So when God looks at us, we are guilt free. That doesn't make us perfect. Man, I don't have perfect eyes, I can tell you. And this Sahara sand is aggravating them to a significant degree. When you turn 70, as I am now, I can tell you for certain you do not have a perfect Bashar body. Not that I had one when I was, 25 either, but it isn't what it used to be. No, we're not perfect. And if we were perfect, it wouldn't even be interesting. And if everything just came to us instantly and we didn't have to work for anything, well, how would we value it?
You wouldn't value it.
Why would God refer to his covenant as a family and of raising children if his whole idea was, when we start with hello, you have this data dump and now you have perfect knowledge?
What are you going to learn after that?
What's the rest of the relationship going to be like? And how did you go there? And at that point, wouldn't it be God saying, the hell with free will? Just here's the stuff, deal with it. I mean, the whole thing that they go through and this machination in their minds is so absurd. But then they would claim that because I'm not perfect, oh, big surprise there, and that I have made the effort to do what almost no one does as an author or a spokesperson, which is to go back and many times improve and enhance and correct anything that I've said in the past and continue to do so, and will probably do so for the next, well, few trillion years. I might get it really right after a few trillion years, don't you think?
You'll get close.
We'll get closer, right?
You'll get
Close.
closer.
Yeah, actually, the funny thing about getting it right and correcting and the nuances and adding to what you know is that the more you know, the more you know. And the faster the pace of new understanding occurs with once you have this momentum that builds up from having a very rich and well-developed foundation. The way I would say that is in the last 6 months, I've discovered more things that are exciting about Yahowah than I did in the 2 years prior. And in those 2 years, I learned more about Yahowah and what he is offering and how it all fits together than I did in the 20 years prior. This is why it's so exciting right now.
Like I said this morning, this is a lot of fun.
It is. It's tremendously fun. But you've got to understand the whole process that we're going through in all of this. And this cult that is, by the way, it's led by a clinically diagnosed psychopath. And I'm not saying that to be mean. This is a person that I and my wife and I did more to help than anyone in her life, in the whole history of her life, to help. And her way of thanking me for doing that and teaching her everything she knows about the subject that she is now using to twist against me is to lead this cult and to drag others into this horrible place and to have them serve as her proxies to go out and do horrible things that is condemning all of their souls. Anyway, there is some good news to this. And I want you to know that the only reason I bring them up is they just won't go away. And well, I don't give a hoot what somebody says about me. If you cared about what somebody said about you, if you had thin skin, you would last about maybe 24 hours in this job. When Yahowah gave me as the first job out of the gate, oh, by the way, you're going to expose Islam and condemn it. And you're going to do so under your own name. And we're going to do thousands of radio interviews together. You have this website. You're going to engage with Muslims who are, going to try to kill you. Don't worry about it, though. It'll be fun. If you had thin skin, do you think you could do thousands of radio interviews, talk radio interviews? You've got guests asking questions. You've got to answer them on the fly. You've got to know more about Islam than any caller. And you have to fend off all of the criticisms that come from the numbskulls that want to, pretend, well, I knew a Muslim. He was my neighbor and he seemed like a nice person. So what you're saying is not true. You cannot have thin skins. I don't have thin skin. I don't really care what somebody says. You can waste your life any way you want to waste your life. But God, in this case, does care because he trades on credibility. And when he chooses someone to communicate through and somebody decides they're going to use his testimony to attack and demean that person, and that person happens to be engaged in the process of doing something that has never been done successfully ever. And that's reintroducing Yahweh's name to his people and getting them to change so that they're receptive to Yahowah and that they embrace their Messiah and King and accept what he did for them by fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bakorim. That is a really big job, getting Jews to return to God. And the time to do so is very short. And so when you get in the way of that, which then determines the successful fulfillment of Pesach, not Pesach, excuse me, of Shabuah, Towrah, Kippurim, and Sukkah, God really takes a dim view of it. And, the last time this occurred, we were drawn to Numbers 12, which is purely prophetic of what we have endured. And I explained exactly how this psychopath went after my wife and then claimed that she too spoke for God. And I shared God's response, which is, hell no, you don't. And by the way, you're now stricken with leprosy and you're excluded from the family and you were divorced. And then she poked her head up again, and God says, oh, well, there's another chapter in Numbers. Why don't you turn back the page? And this is what I wrote about it. And it's Numbers 11, where the Moshe was so frustrated by those that Yahweh was trying to include in the covenant that he finally says, I give up on myself. I give up on you, Yahweh, and I give up on these people. This job is impossible. I want nothing to do with it. And then Yahweh says, yeah, you're right. They're impossible. And you're correct. They cannot be reasoned with. Same situation we're dealing with. But I got a couple of guys. And these are a couple of guys. And with this couple of guys, we'll get the job done. One of those guys happened to be Dode, Eldode, Yahweh's beloved. The other one was my Dode, which is the right hand of Dode coming out of the sea, which speaks of a goy serving Dode, my Dode. And Yahweh says that the two guys were prophets and that they were set up to show Moshe that God would take it from here. If he got him to the promised land, God had a couple of guys that were going to make it all work out from there. And those two guys happened to be Dode and Yada. And he called them prophets. I didn't call myself a prophet. I've gone all the way through this entire process referring to myself as a witness because that's what I had thought. Now, God said it. I didn't say it. If you don't think that God knows what he's talking about, take it up with him. Right? Or let's go another step further. Even though I've explained the nature of who is and who isn't a prophet, and Yahweh explains it in Devarim 18, which is that if you're a prophet, you know it because God has announced it and made it clear. And you're speaking in Yahweh's name. But let's just play along here for a moment. If Yahweh says that my Dode is a prophet, and speaking on behalf of Eldode, the Almighty's beloved, is there any chance that my Dode is a false prophet?
Zero.
Zero. So there you go. It's just astonishing what you see out there. But it's important to you to know that there are numbskulls out there. They happen to be psychopaths, and the entire clan that has been lured into this cult came from a conspiracy. So they're easily fooled. But they're out there and they want to discredit what we're accomplishing on behalf of Yahweh and his people. So this says, it will come to pass in the future. It will come to pass. That means we're not speaking of Dode. It will come to pass in that day. My upright one will once again, and this is Edonai. Edonai means that the one who is the upright pillar in the tabernacle of the restoring witness. And it is, in this case, it's speaking of Yahweh, that my upright one will once again associate his hand. So this is the influence of Yahweh. Now, when Yahweh talks about having his hand, his right hand is David, but he also has influence and a hand at other times. Moshe served as the hand of God. Dode obviously served as the hand of God. This Choder has been given the responsibility as well, and he's even introduced long before this is revealed to Yahshua by Solomon on Towrah during the Sermon on the Mount as being the right hand. And so Dode has a right hand, just as Yahweh has a right hand. So Yahweh's right hand is Dode, Dode's right hand is Yada. That his right hand, a second time, will reacquire, bring forth, and redeem the remnant. Now, if you don't know what this is all about, Yahweh went into Mitzrayim with Moshe to bring out the survivors of the children of Israel. And this is the first Exodus. There is another Exodus. That Exodus is from Babylon. And that Exodus takes place in the last days. And Yahweh is actually going to tell us explicitly that he is removing the remnant of his family from all the places that they were scattered. And those places are places around the world. And he is bringing those individuals back to Jerusalem so that they can benefit from the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, doing so on Towrah. And so he is reacquiring them from being scattered. He is bringing them forth. This is detailed in Zechariah, and it is explained in throughout Yeshaya. So this is a very well conveyed, communicated theme of Yahweh, that he is reacquiring and bringing his people forth to redeem them, to recover this remnant. And the remnant of Yisrael is the mortals who survived the time of Jacob's troubles. And they represent Jews and Israelites that are gathered from around the world on Towrah and brought into Jerusalem for this sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, with Eliah providing the service of being master of ceremonies and Yahweh igniting the fire. And there's just many other things that we've shared with you about this. And it's the remnant of the family who remain. And then here he is saying where he is bringing them out of. Now, this has never happened. Dode has not done this. Moshe didn't do this. Yahweh is doing it through those chariots that he addresses in Zechariah. And he's bringing them out. This would be ethnic Jews, those with Jewish DNA, which Yahweh, by the way, can read. Even with 23andMe going out of business, Yahweh can still read DNA. You know that. Because he's going to go off and he's going to bring those Jews who are not religious and who are marginally political, and he's going to bring them into Israel from out of Asher, which is northern Iraq and Iran, from Mitzrayim, which is lower Egypt, out of Pathros, upper Egypt, from Cush, which would be the Arabian Peninsula, out of Elam, which is southwestern Iran, from Iraq, with Shinar, which is Iraq and Babylon, out of Chamath, which would be Syria, and from the coastlines, the inhabited shores of countries bordered by large bodies of water of the sea. So he will lift up a sign, a nesh. So in conjunction with this, it is Yahweh himself that is lifting up this sign for all to see. It's a standard. It's a ensign. It's a means to communicate the message for the Gentiles and their nations. So it's not just that he's bringing his people home, but he has a sign that he's going to show to the Gentiles and their nations so that they too can be gathered. Because as we go into the celebration of the millennial Shabat, where the earth is returned to the conditions of Eden, there are three distinctly different kinds of individuals. There are the covenant members who have already made this transition from material to spiritual, energy-based light beings. They will be the beneficiaries of the Shabuah harvest and of the Towrah gleaning. That's the first group. That's the A ticket, man. That's the group you want to be part of. The second group is going to be this remnant of Israel, including Yehudim, who were in Israel and survived the time of Jacob's troubles and who survived this worldwide, that will be brought in from all of these places on what's called a white spiritual chariot. The third group come in on what's called the dappled chariot, and they are Goyim. And they are brought in because God is explicit. He wants his people to live in idyllic conditions where they can focus on what's important to him, while the general work that has to take place for the planet to function is done by Goyim. And so the Goyim are going to be deployed in serving God's people. And before you say, well, that's not fair. Well, tremendously fair, because only those who are covenant members, therefore the two harvests, and those that Yahweh redeems of his people, who are going to benefit from the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah and exist during this 1,000-year celebration of life on earth in conditions that are like Eden. And this Gentile remnant that are deemed to have the proper attitude and aptitudes to be of value, everybody else is going to die or be sent off to Sheol, because we're not going to deal with all of the religious chaos and all of the political chaos and all the conspiratorial chaos, all the patriotic chaos. There are not going to be any more Marxists or MAGAs or Muslims in the world. And so they're all gone. So if you're one of these Gentile that is deemed to have the proper attitude and aptitude to work in conditions that are perfect in Eden for the best of humankind, that's a pretty darn good gig. And, it's like what they say, growing older is not so bad when you consider the alternative. Exactly. Living on in this case would be pretty darn beneficial. So that's who God is talking about here. These are the Gentiles and their nations. And then he will gather together and remove the strain and scattered of Yisrael. So all of those who have Jewish DNA, don't confuse, as the rabbis want to do, Judaism with being Jewish. In fact, Jewish isn't even a term that God would relate to. He despises Judaism, and he wouldn't know a Jew if it kissed him on the cheek. Yah was familiar with the term Yisrael, which has had a very negative connotation, those who wrestle and struggle against God, but has also a positive connotation, which will be true at this time, those who engage and endure with the Almighty. He knows Yisrael, and he knows Yahudim, which we render Jews now, but Yahudim means beloved of Yah. They are descendants of Yahudah. And he knows them because their name is based on his name and his son's name, Yahud, Dod, Yahweh and Dod. And so this is the Yisrael that is being gathered. And the dispersed of Yahudah, remember that's a combination of Yahweh's name and Dod's name. It means Yahweh's beloved. He will gather up and obtain from the four extremities of the earth. This is that white chariot. In fact, there's four chariots here and talked about, and I'm sharing with you now from Isaiah 11:12. But to understand prophecy, you have to have this, Yahweh would call it the spirit of Chakma and the spirit of Bien. These things are necessary to understand prophecy. And what they say is you have to have a processor that can cerebrally understand this material, as well as this ability to make the connections between various things that God has communicated so that you can comprehend what he is saying. In Zechariah, we're told precisely how these four chariots come out of heaven. The red one stays in Jerusalem because the red one is for that man from Edom who is dressed in red, the Adamah Parah, which is the red bull that is so productive. He stays there. It goes back to when I asked Yahweh one time many years ago now, probably almost 9 years ago, when I was asking him, what's going to happen with Asher when we go on Towrah, and Yahweh said, "Where do you think you're going?" I ain't going anywhere. I am the sacrifice on Towrah, and so the red chariot stays there for all to see. And what Yahweh wants with me in that red chariot is he wants to show that after 3.5 years of being there with Elia and having faced all manner of demons, real and human, and faced them down and conveyed this message so powerfully, he wants to show that while we have been impervious because of the protection of the Malach and the Ruach, that I will willingly, from this chariot that's a spiritual chariot of God, that I will willingly get out and have the Malach and the Ruach stand down and taunt the corporeal manifestation of Hasatan, the adversary, into killing me, to fulfill this prophecy. That it is clearly by choice that I have made the decision to trust God in this way on behalf of his people. That is what resonates with them. And then there is the black chariot, and the black chariot is to dispatch with all of the DNA positive Yehud and Israelites around the planet who have remained religious. They can't be saved. And then, so it's bye-bye rabbis and Haredim and ultra-Orthodox and all the manner of religious Jews. Then that's the black chariot. Then there's the white chariot, and the white chariot's purpose is to pick up the Yahudim, the Yehud here, and the Israelites who are anti-religious and apolitical, and bringing them into Jerusalem and from the four corners of the earth. At the same time, God is using the dappled chariot to pick up the Goyim with the right attitude and aptitude. So this is all going on. And then while Yahweh is performing as he did with Elia previously and lighting the flames beneath the carcass of the Adamah Parah, those flames are going to purge this mortal remnant of Israel and probably the Goyim who have come there so they can also be present in God's presence. And it's also going to incinerate all the religious and political on the earth. They're all going to be incinerated because the earth is going to be terraformed back into the conditions found in Eden. And so that is the reason why these people all have to be there. And that's why there's this comprehensive list that is explaining all of this. And all of this pertains to what guy? This whole chapter is on the Choder, right? Yep. All of this, and all of this takes place before Dod arrives. Dod doesn't arrive for another 10 days. The king inherits a family. We bring it to him. And he's grateful for it. So, I'm obviously appreciative. I'm energized to have been chosen and equipped for this rather extraordinary purpose. But make no mistake, it has not been easy. I have devoted 12 hours a day on average, 6 and now 7 days a week for the past 24 years to translating, studying, contemplating, and sharing insights that I derived while learning from the Torah Wanabi, the Torah teachings of God and the Nabi prophets. And in the process, I have been afforded a unique understanding of God's revelations, deducing conclusions that have been unheralded previously and throughout all of time, including one last night when this mother goddess cult from the psychopath came up with the idea that the Towrah had to be dowed. You mentioned to me that at that point, I have not even read the lyrics of their songs. I subsequently have. And it's just appalling, disgusting is the best way to describe it. But when you said that they were now saying that the Towrah is dowed, I said, no. Dowed is the Shemach. God says it explicitly. He's the Shemach. That's the big damn branch. This Towrah is a sucker. It's a little stem. I'm happy to be a sucker, to give productive new growth to the fallen stump and to be a stem used by God. Hey, man, I'm delighted with that. But that is a huge demotion for doubt. And so I said, no, it's not even remotely possible. But immediately, it's just how I think the Spirit works within me that Yahweh has placed there. I knew the answer. I said, finally, the single most disconcerting statement in the Torah, the one that I get nagged on all the time. And I said, no, I'm not going back there. Not enough information to render it intelligently. I don't understand it. Nobody understands it. I mean, today I read the AI analysis of total religious rendering of killing the guy that picked up logs, branches, and stems on the Shabat and stoning that person to death. I read it and said, oh my God. I mean, obviously the reason I never wanted to go into this thing before is that everybody is so absolutely wrong that it's just frightening how bad the understanding is. But immediately I knew the answer. And so I went back this morning when first thing I woke up and I said, I'm going to read everything in Numbers, which is where this appears. Numbers 13, 14, and 15 in Hebrew. And I'm going to make certain that what I discovered is true. And oh my. Numbers 14, after this rebellion by the woman Miriam, who serves as the counterpart for this psychopath that has been trying to derail God's purpose. After that chapter, the 13th chapter of Numbers is all about the spies. And the spies are described in a manner that is perfect for what this woman has been doing. And using terms that you're just going to be amazed when I share it with you, the words that were chosen to describe this. And so it sets up these spies that are to go into a dozen people, which is about the number of people that are part of this cult. We have individuals who have been on their distribution list.
I know who they all are.
Yeah, we know who they all are, that are just nauseating in their rebellion. I mean, just disgusting. And I don't want to share it anymore because it's just too childish, too stupid. It's embarrassing to ever have been associated with them. That's how childish and embarrassing they are. But it's about a dozen of them, and there were a dozen spies sent in. And they all saw things that they reported on inaccurately. And there was really only one person that got it right, because Yeshua ben Nun made it through, not because of his response, not because of anything he said, but because he was groomed to be Moshe's successor in taking the children into the promised land. There's only one guy, really. Caleb. The guy whose name means all judgment. It's totally judgmental. And he's the one guy. And Yahweh said, listen, for the rest of you, you're going to be nothing but corpses. I'm not going to allow a single one of you in. And oh, by the way, the number here is 40. You had 40 days there. It's going to be 40 years now. 40, 40, 40. Understand 40 because that's a really important number in terms of timing. And you're going to be nothing but a pile of corpses. I'm telling you, you're going to be a pile of corpses. I'm not letting you in. I think you're repulsive. You know, I've performed all manner of miracles through my guy. I've told you things that you could never have even imagined to be true. I've taken you from being completely ignorant to now having the very keys to the kingdom of heaven. I've done all of this for you, and yet you spit in my face. That's what God said. He was not pleased. In fact, this was his Moshe moment, which he says, I don't want any part of them. I don't want nothing to do with them. As far as I'm concerned, you got Caleb, and I'm going to go along with Yoshua ben Nun. But the rest of you, I want nothing. You're nothing but death to me. And what does Yahweh said about dead corpses? Don't touch them, right? Nope. I'm not touching you, man. You're dead corpses. Okay. So that takes you through 13 and 14. How does 15 open? You know? Yeah. 15 is really interesting. God says, I got a couple of guys. Got a plan here. It's obvious that Israel, and it was Moshe now begging with Yahweh, listen, you are compassionate. You are, you do favor your people. You really do love them somewhere deep down in there. We got to come up with a plan here because them all being dead, is not a good plan. God. We need a plan here, God. And Yahweh says, okay. To accommodate my guy, he's right on this one. I'm going to come up with a plan. And I got a couple of guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a lamb and a bull. Okay. We're going to start with the lamb and bull. And the lamb and the bull are going to both be sacrifices. Then he goes through and he says, we're going to start with the lamb. And the lamb's going to be mixed with wine and with olive oil and with purified grain, the three symbols of our redemption. And that lamb, we're going to make a sacrifice of that lamb. And it's to correct you being so foolishly and consistently mistaken. It's a free will offering of the lamb to resolve that. Okay, so we're going to do that. But, it's going to take a little more. So we're going to do exactly the same thing with that bull. We're going to have the bull associated with the grain, Shabuah. We're going to have him associated with the olive oil, Towrah. We're going to have him associated with the wine, bloody red, in that wine vat with the Yashayah. And we're going to sacrifice the bull too. Towrah, the Adam of Parah. I got a couple of guys. That's what we're going to do. Oh, and by the way, just for good measure at the end, we're going to have a goat. Oh, yeah. Is going to chip it. He goes through this whole thing about the three guys. These are the same three guys in Daniel, by the way. Goes through these three guys. They're going to resolve this problem. And he keeps on saying of Israel being mistaken. It's just perfect. And then after he goes through and he says, okay, that's the plan. We've got a remedy for this that we've got in place, and it'll eventually materialize. He goes immediately to this guy that's out picking up branches and stems on the Shabat. They say, well, what are we supposed to do? And it says, stone him to death. Why? Well, no one understood why. The branch, he's that lamb. When did he offer himself in terms of removing our mistakenness? Wasn't it on a Shabbat?
Yep.
The Shabbat of Matzah, wasn't it? When does that bull, who happens to be a stem, remove the guilt of the people so that they can be reconciled and Dode can return with Yahowah?
That happens on a Shabbat.
Happens on a Shabbat. Don't pick up the damn sticks on the Shabbat. I've got them there for a purpose. And oh, by the way, it doesn't even call the sticks. You know what he calls them? Because he uses one word. So if he uses one word, it's not shemek, the big honkin' branch that's Dode, and it isn't choder, the little stem that is yada. No, he uses the word for tree. Don't be picking up the damn tree. Why? Have you ever wondered why there were two trees in the Garden of Eden? Well, two trees, right? And God didn't say, by the way, you couldn't eat from the trees. He said you can eat from any tree. Just understand, if you eat from that tree, which is the tree of knowledge. Oh, by the way, knowledge. You know how it's written? It's when it's a noun, that's a noun form. Dayat. You know what the verbal root is of dayat? Yada.
Yada. Yeah.
Yada is the process of knowing. Dayat is the result of that process. That's why when the seven spirits are offered, and is actually an eighth one thrown in at the end reasoning, that is put in the end of this. But when the seven spirits of Yahweh are being offered, and you would have thought that he would have started with the spirit of Dayat, because that's knowledge. You have to start with the base of knowledge before you can even engage your processor to be chakma, smart, and before you can make the connections to understand, right? And BN, and then having this ability to put together the whole picture in Edith, and then to be able to have the courage of the convictions to go forward and share this. And why then is Dayat listed 6 among the 7th? Wouldn't you think it'd be first? No, because it's the noun form. It's the result of all of this. It's not the process. The others are the process. That is the result of it. So that tree that's in the garden, that's the one that if you eat from, you will die. Well, that, you know why he booted them out of the garden? Because if they used what they learned from that tree to go to the tree of lives, they wouldn't die. And God said, there's a whole process we're going to go through before you can go to that tree of lives. I got a lot of work to do. Dode is the tree of lives. That's why he is the Shemach. That's why he has 3 lives. That's why he opened the door to our second life on Pesach. He is the tree of lives. And Yada is the tree of Dayat. Because you can't get back to the tree of lives without knowledge. And you got to have the knowledge of both good and bad. You got to know what's wrong before you're even receptive to what is right. That's those 2 trees. And that's why it's actually mentioned that the guy was out picking up just sticks. He wasn't just picking up branches and stems. He was uprooting the damn trees. And it's the tree of knowledge and the tree of lives. Now, I will tell you, the irritant of those songs, for me to, before I even knew the lyrics, just by way of your introduction, to be able to resolve what I think is the most disquieting statement in the entirety of the Torah, and then to have it go, wow, what a wonderful explanation that Yahweh has given us in this context, and that it was specifically suited and prescribed for this very moment because it's a prophecy. How about that?
And it follows sequentially, right?
Yes.
After the Miriam incident, and this all ties together.
It does. The 11th chapter leads to the 12th. The 12th leads to the 13th. The 13th leads to the 14th. The 14th leads to the 15th. We're talking about the 15th. Oh, by the way, you know what they were asked to toss on the man who uprooted the trees on the Shabbat?
Stone him?
Yes, and what the word is, Eben. You know what that means? Son. They're throwing the sun at him. There you go. Yeah, it's really good. When it comes to communicating and metaphors and telling a story,
There's nobody better than you.
oh
when it
man,
comes to metaphors.
he really does a good job. And by the way, this is why it takes 24 years of living with this before you're in a position to explain what now you understand, and no one previously to this moment has understood that story. This is what it takes to get there. This is why it's so rewarding and enjoyable once you get there. And oh, by the way, I gave you this summary version because my wife's right. I can't keep a secret. When Yahowah shares something with us that's profoundly important, I'm going to share it with you. And that's just the way I am. I'm just not good at keeping stuff. I'm a sharer. And I am now in the process of translating and presenting numbers after I've already done numbers 11 and 12 for you. I'm going to do, I'm right now a third of the way through 13. Started this morning. I'll do 14. I'll do 15. And we'll do a series of shows on them because the nuances make it spectacular for us. So that's quite an introduction to who the Towrah is and who the Towrah is not, and why it's important for you to have access to the tree of knowledge of good and bad at this time, and why the 35 books on the shelf of Yada Yahowah do exactly that. And oh, by the way, in terms of good and bad, there are 13 of them that the entire purpose of the 13 is to share this is what's wrong. This is what's wrong with Christianity. This is what's wrong with Judaism. This is what's wrong with Islam. 13. No one's ever done that before. No one's ever written tomes like that before on those three religions. That's the bad. The other 20 some odd books are the good. Take you right to Yahowah, beginning with an introduction to God, concluding with coming home. Love the way a story comes together, don't you? So returning to the rubbish of religion, now that you've had this introduction, I had once thought that the only aspects of the Greek eyewitness accounts, which might be considered credible, would have been the words and deeds of someone that I conceived for a short while to be named Yosha. And I just assumed that maybe that's what there was really meant by the Greek iousus, that iousus was somehow a transliteration of Yosha. Okay, so it was a major stretch. And obviously it was untrue. But I didn't know that there was no person not named Iusu, not named Jesus, not named Yosha in the first century CE. No person ever existed. And the reason I had thought this occurred is that it made perfect sense for Yahowah, per the prophets, to have fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim in 33 CE, year 4000 Yah. It all points to that being done. And so you have to have somebody doing it. And so I said, okay, it must have been some aspect that Yahowah projected, some aspect of his nephesh soul, used it as an avatar. And so Yahowah's nephesh soul accepted a Bashar body, used it as an avatar, and therefore that was the Passover lamb. But that is really convoluted and a twisted testimony of everything that we were told through the prophets. And then how in the world does the nephesh of Yahowah get associated with our guilt and carry it into Sheol? You think that Yahowah went into Sheol? I don't think so. So that doesn't work. And it's really cumbersome when Yahowah says that if we were to go this route and assume that firstborn children and the fulfillment of firstborn children was Yahweh's Nephesh. How would Yahweh's Nephesh be his own child? And so I didn't like it, but he had to have some explanation because it's obvious that Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim got fulfilled in 33 CE. Oh. Well, then there's an answer. There's no Yosha. There's no Ayusus, Ayusun, Ayusu. No. It's Dod. He told us through Daniel, which we've already mentioned, when Gabriel speaks, Gabriel is Dod. And he tells us the exact day that he is going to fulfill Chag Matzah in 33 CE. The exact day that he's going to do it over 600 years in advance. And then he writes in first person in the 22nd Mizmor of exactly how he's going to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim with him being crucified on Pesach. 600 years before Rome existed, 700 years before crucifixion existed, 1,000 years before it occurred. And once you know that, then it's Dod who volunteered to do this. And then you read all of the Mizmor Psalms where Yahweh is saying that Dod is the one that he is saving his people through, the means to our deliverance. That he is our Yasha, Dod is. And he's also the Messiah and Son of God. How convenient. So there really was a Messiah and a Son of God who fulfilled Pesach in 33 by being crucified. It's just that everybody had the wrong name. It's Dod. And Yahweh made it really clear after telling us everything that he was accomplishing through his son Dod in the 89th Mizmor. He went and said that anybody that makes any other claim different than what I said about my son being the Messiah and the returning king and the Zeroah, which is the Passover lamb, they're calling me a liar. That's the answer. Go where the words lead. That is what is the purpose of this mission, is you go where the words lead. There's no Yeshua, Yosha. In fact, there are only two Yoshas in the entire story that Yahweh tells. One of them is the guy who really doesn't do a whole lot until he's finally on his own. When he's with Moshe, it's like when Eldod and my Dod were prophesying, and he said, "Oh man, we got to stop this, man. We got to stop because you're the guy, you know. We got to stop this, stamp it out. No." And Moshe said, "Are you out of your mind? This is exactly what we want. This is the answer. God's got these couple of guys, and these guys are going to speak prophetically for him. Don't tell them to stop. This is the answer. All I got to do now is get him to the promised land. God's going to take it from there." But
that's what he needed to hear at that time.
Absolutely. And but Yosha ben Nun didn't understand it. And when they went into the promised land as the spies, clearly Yosha ben Nun came out. He was unfazed, but the entire speech, the defense, was all by Koleb. So anyway, he's the first, and he's kind of a warrior. He goes in, and his job is to clean out the rubbish, get rid of the bubonic plague rats. That was his job. So if Yahweh had some issue with Dod spending a lot of his life defending his people, which he really didn't have a problem with, but the guy that was tough was Yosha. Anyway, there's a second one. We meet him in Zechariah, and he is Yosha, the high priest. And what is it said of him? Even Satan brings it up to Yahweh and said, "Listen, this dude is so disgusting and so filthy, as are all of his loudmouth companions. He is of no use. You can't use him. Nah, 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 nah. Means you can't anoint the mercy seat or the Ark of the Covenant. Nah, 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 nah. There is no Yosha. You lost. I won. Ha, ha, ha." What does Yahweh say? Well, not so quick. I got a couple of guys. It's Dod that's going to dress up. And he tells us in Zechariah that Dod is dressing up as the priest to anoint the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant when he returns as king. And that other guy, he's the one that keeps on pointing his finger and say, it's Dode. It's Dode. He is the one. There is no Jesus. There is no Christ. The Christian New Testament is utter garbage. The story is about Dode David. He's the one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim. He had a couple of guys. That's all it took. So live and learn. The myth was that Paul created was born out of what I call replacement foolology, and taking what rightfully belonged to Dode and misappropriating it, creating a myth through identity theft. But, it's one thing for somebody to steal my identity, which, somebody has done previously, two people have done over time, to rob me of money. It's another thing. That's bad. But it's another thing to steal the identity of God's beloved Son, who served to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, to give us eternal life and to perfect us so that we can end up in God's family. That's really bad. When you steal from God, his beloved Son, and you rob his people of their inheritance because of it, that identity theft on a 1 to 10 scale is a 4 trillion. It is an express ticket to hell. It is the basis of Christianity. So the next plank to fall was what I had wrongly assumed could have been the eyewitness account of the disciple Levi, which is now called Matthew. Read Mark 2:14 and Luke 5:27 and compare that with Matthew 9:9. But then upon further consideration, I discovered that it was plagiarized from 3 sources. Mark, who wrote the gospel according to Paul. Luke, who was Paul's propagandist. And the Ibanim, who had their act together, but it's the Ibanim who recorded what Dode actually said in Hebrew. And so that Dode's Sermon on the Mount is equivalent to his son's Sermon on the Mount 1,000 years previous. And it's the text of it in 5, 6, and 7 destroy Christianity. So it's just so odd that they would be there because it is completely lethal to the Christian religion. And then the other part that's lethal to the Christian religion is the Olivet Discourse. And it's apparent that that's the only things, by the way, that's different, additive in Matthew that wasn't copied from Mark or from Luke, a job of plagiarizing, and it came from the Ibonim. And so I realized, wait a minute. So really all you got in Matthew that has any value is the accounts of the Ibonim, which means the Olivet Discourse and the Sermon on the Mount. The rest of it is just plagiarized from hearsay accounts that were written by Paul's pals. And Paul was, by his own admission, demon-possessed. And by God's testimony, Paul is the plague of death. So when you discover that it was plagiarized from those 3 different sources and plagiarized 3 generations after Dode's arrival, was plagiarized in 95 CE. That is 3 generations, 60 years after the fact. That you might as well just toss it all away. And at least it wasn't a complete loss, as I said, because the contributions of the Ibonim were considerable, bringing us the almost all of the content that was not plagiarized from Mark and Luke, and thus, as I've said, the Sermon on the Mount and the Olivet Discourse. Now, I will share with you what I discovered about the book of John in our next program. And I thank you for listening. I appreciate having this opportunity to spill the beans about what or spill the trees, if you will, on. And you got to know that this is a big deal to me, because the passage that I am actually taunted with the most and saying, if your God is so loving and forgiving, and he is has all of this fair, and he is just sharing his Torah as instructions and guidance to follow, then why did he have the guy that picked up sticks, just sticks on the Shabat, stoned to death? And when you read it out of context, the answer is, I don't know. This sounds horrible. Why would God do that? And then you read it in context of what's actually occurring, and you understand who the players are and who that lamb is, who that bull is, and who that goat is. Then all of a sudden you take an entirely different view to it, and you've now resolved the single most difficult passage in the Torah to explain. So I thank you for listening. Been a joy to be down here in the Rainbow Studio with you. We look forward to another program tomorrow. We may or may not do another program today because I am really focused on trying to translate and fully appreciate the nuances in Yahweh's revelation through Moshe and Numbers, Bamidbar, 13, 14, and 15. And that is the priority at the moment. So thank you for listening. Look forward to being with you tomorrow.